What's the most chilling thing that's woken you up in the middle of the night? The TV turned on in the living room of our old one-bedroom apartment at 4 AM at full volume blasting Missy Elliott Work It. It was bizarre because we never listened to the music channel or had the volume that high. Creeps me out to this day. Ghost bro, just want to work it. When I was 16, a roach jumped onto my mouth. I went from sleeping to on my feet in less than half a second. I couldn't sleep in my room for a week. I just rented a home and decided to spend the night in it before all my things arrived early the next day. So I made a simple bed out of a camping mat on the floor of the bedroom and went to sleep. I was woken at 2 AM by someone tapping me on the shoulder. I snapped awake to find no one there and decided it must have been in my head or I dreamed it, so I went back to sleep. About an hour later I was awoke again by someone tapping me on the thigh. This time I flipped on a flashlight and again I found no one in the room. However, this time I caught movement out of the corner of my eye and discovered my intruder. There were at least 3 or 4 ants trying to find cover from the light of my flashlight. I grew up on a farm, very comfortable with rodents, but that incident freaked me out for a couple nights. My sister once left a half-eaten now-en later near my pillow. We slept with the window open, and I was woken by the gentle pitter-patter of dozens of freaking ants crawling on my face. I was like 9 at the time, and almost 22 years later I still can't handle ants being on me. If one gets on me I feel thousands of them. So it wasn't exactly at night, but early morning during a storm. Felt the loudest thunder blast ever. Sounded like it was right next to me. My friend was spending the night and we both went from out cold to adrenaline rushing and sitting up at the same time. The whole house had been shook like a bomb went off. Every car in the neighborhood got their alarm set off by it. I've never gone from sleeping to alert so quickly. We had a storm like that a few months ago. I've never heard thunder like it. I love thunderstorms, but this one actually made my butthole pucker. As a 7-year-old terrified of an alien abduction, I woke up one night to this frantic scratching sound somewhere in my room. I was paralyzed with fear, and it continued for a few minutes, stopped, started again, then stopped for good. I laid awake for a while after that, then finally fell asleep again. When I woke up in the morning, I found out my hamster had gotten out of his home, and the scratching was his claws on the vinyl cover of a 3-ring binder. I was 7 or 8 fearing the same when my parents put a brand new humidifier in my room. I woke up hearing what I thought was scratching on my window, then it stopped. A few minutes later I heard it again. Too scared to get up and turn the light on, I hid under the covers for a while. After the 3rd time I realized it was the humidifier making bubbles as it went into the filter. When my dog freaks out barking out the window, the house next door to me doesn't have anyone living in it and there are crap loads of tweakers in my town, so I'm always afraid I'm going to have to take a bat to some freaking cranked out lunatic. It probably wouldn't faze them. LOL. I once woke up to someone looking in my bedroom with a small red light. I was petrified. I didn't left my bed until the next morning. I asked my family about it, but they all said I was probably dreaming. I'm pretty sure it was my big brother, but still, terrified me for so long. I spent the summer working on a farm. The farm was run by an old lady and her husband. Myself and 5 other male workers lived in a cottage annex set apart from the main farm. It was fairly remote and the nearest neighbor was around a mile away. I awoke in the middle of the night with an uneasy feeling. I shared the room with one other guy and I could hear him snoring away. It was warm in the room, so I went to open the window. As I opened it I heard a child's laughter outside. The old couple who ran the farm were childless. No family at all. The other workers were all single foreign men. There were no children on this farm. It freaked me the heck out. I closed the window with a slam, drew the curtains, made sure the door was locked and jumped back into bed. In the morning I asked the old farmer if the neighbors had kids. He said the neighboring farm was run by one old guy by himself who hired workers. None of them brought families. Hearing a bear's breaths as I was laying in my tent, I saw the tracks in the morning, but I also smelled it as I laid there awake. I woke up from a pretty dead sleep to hear my dog growling at the corner of my room. I lifted my head and saw what looked like an alien with these ridges down its spine, sharp teeth and large eyes. It hissed and rushed the bed, and next thing I knew I blacked out. Who knows how long later, but I suddenly came to My dog was now outside of my room whining to be let in, and once she licked my face and whimpered. When I went back to sleep I had a dream about my spine being pushed forward to my stomach. Freaks me out to this day. Not me, but when I was younger I used to sneak into my sister's room while she was sleeping and surround her bed with autobiographies and biographies. Basically any books with faces on the cover. I'd turn on the light and she'd wake up to see 20 odd celebrities staring at her in her sleep. She screamed like a jackhole. I once snuck into my sister's room, climbed on the top unoccupied bunk, up under the blankets, and said, "I'm going to eat you." My youngest sister wailed. My mother would come in and console her. Once she left I did it again. Freaking mad rude, but I was a dumb kid, lol. I woke up to some noises going on in my hallway. Heard my door open a little bit and someone walk in. Having a huge internal struggle with myself on what I should do. Fight or flight. I felt next to me to make sure my ex-GF was still there and just gave the slightest graze to try and not make noise. She was. So as they got closer I was building to courage to just start punching as hard as I could. Right before I'm about to jump I hear Mysterian, turns out it was my ex. I just felt the pillow. Another time I woke up to a static TV about a week after watching The Ring in theaters. That messed me up for about a week. Last story. I woke up randomly once in the middle of the night on the couch. There was a nightlight on in the bathroom down the hall so I had terrible eyesight. But I sat up for a second and looked around for the remote. I see behind me a guy just sitting in my computer chair not moving. I freak out and just book it into my room. I had no way to contact my parents without screaming. I was younger, didn't have a cell phone at the time, so I grabbed my airsoft gun and a baseball bat and slowly make my way back out. Flip the light ready to shoot or charge. Turns out it was just my clothes laid out on the chair. Flip the light ready to shoot or charge. Turns out it was just my clothes laid out on the chair. LOL, I've had this happen before, so now I always turn my chair sideways at night so they don't give off a silhouette to panic my dumb sleeping brain. Woke up to my dad covered in blood shaking me like a lunatic. Apparently he had a dream that he was in an army and was killing people. He woke up, went to the bathroom, saw he was covered in blood from a nosebleed, and thought he sleepwalked, murdered his family. That's disturbing. I was at work one evening, firefight asleep in the station. We had run a call that day where a gentleman late 60s was in his living room performing a ritual and his neighbors were worried he was suicidal. Anyway, he says we will have visitors at night. We take him in for a psych eval at the hospital. 3 AM we have a knock on our door. No one there, we head back to bed. Around 4:30 another louder knock. We get up, no one is there. Come morning time there was a note on our bay door that said you were visited and watched. Pretty chilling. I got the note back at the station, actually off duty now but can provide proof if anyone wants. Show the note please. Had someone firing off a gun pretty much right outside my bedroom window. I was living in a duplex in a rather shady part of town, and one night I awoke to gunshots, about 5 or 6 of them, right outside my bedroom window. I was toying with the idea as to whether or not to move into my grandmother's house on the other side of the state. My parents bought it for her, and she had passed away in it. My biggest concern was the commute to and from work. I told my parents I'd think about it. That night, I'd punctuate each gunshot with "I'm moving to West Georgia. I'm moving to West Georgia. I'm moving to West Georgia. I'm motherfucking moving to goddamn West Georgia." Called my parents the next day and said, "Yup, I'm moving. I'll start hauling crap this weekend." A few months after moving into that house, I discovered I had a roach problem. Mainly the little German cockroaches. I've tried bombing the place. I used to be vigilant with the sprays. Nothing worked. One particular night, I was lying in bed, on the verge of sleep, breathing through my mouth because I had the sinus infection from heck, when a live cockroach crawled onto my face and into my mouth. I spat that sucker clear across the room and ran into the bathroom. I dry heaved, then used maybe half a tube of toothpaste to brush my teeth. There's not enough Listerine in the world to wash out your mouth after it's been invaded by a live cockroach. You could call up the factory that makes it and ask them to send the biggest drum of the Coolman Listerine they have, and it still won't be enough. Those gunshots don't sound as terrifying anymore after reading the second story. I bought an old armoire dresser off a Facebook garage sale group. The doors on it would bang and vibrate in the night. One night my husband woke me up, all the dresser is doing it again. So I sit up and yell, knock it off. It's 1 in the morning and it banged so loud. Sounded like someone punched it. Got rid of it after that. My kids had a speak and spell when they were small, and one day someone spilled a can of Coke on the darn thing. After I dried it off a bit, I placed it on the shelf in the rec room. Couple of nights later when my husband was at work, that thing came alive at 3 AM. All I heard from the bedroom was loud unrecognizable gibberish. Guess all the circuits formed random connections. I really thought aliens had landed. The love of my life. At the time, I was a senior in high school, so take that with a grain of salt. The girl I thought I would one day marry broke up with me just before we graduated. Prior to that, she gave me one of those picture frames that you can record your voice on for my birthday with a picture of us. Normally you had to press a button to make the recording play. Well, one night, very late, I was sleeping and awoke to a loud voice in my room coming from my closet. I shot up in a panic and realized it was the dang picture frame, playing the recording my ex made for me over and over in a loop. I ran to the closet, grabbed it and ripped the batteries out. Freaked me the heck out because of how random it was, and it didn't help that it was the middle of the night and I was still heartbroken over everything. It was like I was being taunted. I was asleep in bed in my room by myself with the door locked when I heard a sharp hey in my ear. Then a second time. Hey, it was a male voice. There were 2 other women at home that night. No men in the house. For a second I was too afraid to sit up. Like, I was too afraid to move. But then I scrambled for my light switch. Terrified. The room was empty. But, I think, maybe they aren't in my room. Maybe they're in the hall. So I get up the nerve and go look. But the house is empty and the alarm is still set. There is, however, a smell in the hall. Something weird. I followed it to the kitchen and discovered that the gas on the stove had been left on. Hallucination from the gas? Almost certainly. You got very lucky. This could easily have ended up with you dead. Cats fighting in the alley behind my house. Sounded like babies screaming, and waking up to it with no context was terrifying. People saying sleep paralysis. I was diagnosed with epilepsy that way. From when I was 11-14 I had weird dizzy spells my parents said was just puberty. When I was 14 I woke up paralyzed, was screaming and freaking out. Got taken to her, and they put me in the mental ward saying there's no medical reason why she can't move. But we can tell she really does believe she can't move. Cut to a few days later. They finally do an MRI, and I have temporal lobe epilepsy. Was experiencing a type of seizure called Todd's paralysis, where you have a seizure in your sleep and your brain and body lose connection after it. Turns out all those weird dizzy spells was me having complex partial seizures several days a week. A blood-curdling shriek. No other way to describe it. I was living in an on-campus house one summer. One night, I suddenly wake up to this scream that sounded like it had come from nearby. I lay there for a moment trying to figure out if I'd actually heard it or just dreamed, and where it had come from, and whether I should do anything about it or not. I'm listening to see if I hear anything else, any other kind of disturbance. Nothing. I have myself half convinced that I dreamed it when I hear a door open and heavy footsteps enter the house. The guy immediately identified himself by calling out campus safety, which was a relief. But also now I'm thinking that I definitely must have heard a scream and either security also heard it or someone called them in. Now I have to decide whether to get out of bed and go talk to the security guy. I'm curious about what's going on. But on the other hand, it's not like I could really tell him anything. And then after another minute or so he calls out again, "This is campus security. I've removed the bat," and then leaves. So then I was just glad I hadn't embarrassed myself by going out and trying to helpfully inform him that I'd heard someone screaming about a bat in the house. Plot twist. It was a bat screaming. Another plot twist. The girl screamed because someone hit her with a baseball bat. I got a phone call in the middle of the night from a number I didn't recognize. On the static wire line was a woman yelling frantically in a language I couldn't identify because I was practically asleep. I was shook, so the next morning I called back, but the number was disconnected. This happened to me back in April. I was working night shift as a security officer switchboard operator and got this woman who called in yelling something to me in a random language. Before I could write anything down, she hung up. All I got was 3:45 from her rambling, and we don't have caller ID on the switchboard so I can't see who called. This has actually been happening to me quite often recently. Since university started back up, I moved into a new apartment, and each night before I go to bed, I always close my bedroom door completely. I've woke up in the middle of the night about 2-3 times a week and watching my door open completely. It's the spookiest thing. What's even scarier is that last night I locked my door for the first time and it still opened in the middle of the night. Our apartment was in a rather old house, bedrooms in the attic. I sometimes wondered if it was haunted, but I'm a rational adult, so of course not. I put up blue Christmas lights to light the stairs up to the attic loft. The door to our room had a rudimentary lock, but didn't fit the door fully so you could see under the door. That year for Christmas I got a crappy gift from a buddy of mine. A baseball bat. I have never played baseball, and as a joke I kept it next to the bed for burglars. Now that the setup is done, the story. One night I woke up, eyes still sleepy and groggy and closed, and I looked towards the door and, lit by the blow light of the Christmas lights, see a pair of little girls' shoes under the door. Instantly I am awake, my blood like ice. After excruciating seconds, where the girl tries the lock on the door, I get out of bed and grab the bat. I creep toward the door. Everything feels like slow motion. Fling the door open and attack the girl spirit I know is behind the door. I wake up slowly and look at the door. The blue light is shining into the room from the bottom of the door. There are no shoes. I wake up my boyfriend and freak the frick out for about an hour and have to sleep with the lights on. No more blue Christmas lights on the stairs for the rest of the time we lived there. Okay, but now the little girl is standing in darkness outside your door. I recommend floodlights, and also burning your house down. I sleep during the day because I work nights. I'd lived in my house for a few years at this point. I'm suddenly woken up by the sound of my front door being opened and then slammed shut. I'm a really heavy sleeper and I heard it loud and clear. Even my dogs heard it and started freaking out, barking, etc. I didn't think my husband would be home early. I get up, get my pistol and go look. Everything is locked up like it should be. No one is in my house except me. I go out the front door and all of my neighbors are gone at work. Live in the burbs. Freaked me out. Text my husband about it and he kind of blows me off. About a year later, I'm at work. It's 1 AM and I get a text from my husband, who never texts me in the middle of the night unless something is wrong. He says he's sleeping and he hears the front door open and then slam shut. Woke the dogs up too, but they tried to hide under the blankets, which is not like them at all. Needless to say, my husband believes me now. I think you may have a squatter. I would suggest setting up a camera. A few nights ago, I woke up and heard someone outside my window yell fricking frick and then heard a thud. I live on the 3rd floor, so it didn't really bother me. Was too asleep to look out the window. I have really intense vivid dreams and have woken up multiple times to what sounds like somebody in my apartment screaming the name Kelly. That's not even close to being my name and I don't know anybody named Kelly. I'm sure it's the dream, but the voice sounds so loud and so real it wakes me up. Spooky. Kelly, that's real. You're creating a fake life in your mind to cope with being in a coma. Please wake up. I had a super vivid nightmare about a good friend of mine from high school committing suicide. He didn't in real life. He's alive and well and as far as I know leading a happy life. But the dream was so clear that I woke up and sat up in my bed just in shock for probably a good 5 minutes before coming to my senses. I have had multiple times that I woke up to a sensation that felt like someone was tickling my foot. It's strange. It mostly happens around 3 AM and what's even stranger is that it stops as soon as I am fully conscious. Ghost has a foot fetish. Woke up to something that was the size of a small cat at the foot of my bed. It was wearing a pointed hat-like thing and its face was covered with some sort of clothing. All a sort of stained brown fabric or maybe burlap. Looked at it and then lay down. Processed what I saw. Looked up again and it was gone. Almost 100% just being me still half asleep, but it was kinda unsettling. I did a short stint hitchhiking back when I was 18. I was going up the west coast on 101 in California. On my first day, I had made some good distance. It was getting dark, so I started looking for a place to camp for the night near the on-ramp I was at. Went down this little hill and found what looked like a really dirty ragged campsite. A filthy blanket on the ground and a beat up bag. I looked around and didn't see anyone. I called out hello. I swear, I heard a small raspy voice of a woman say go away. You're scaring me. I looked around and didn't see anyone. I called out again and heard nothing. I hightailed it out of there. I went across the street and way back into the bushes where no one would just stumble on me. I was freaked out and slept with my knife in my hand. Later that night, I woke up to someone grabbing my legs. I thought it was the silent crazy lady from across the street. I jerked my legs and turns out it was a squirrel. My husband and I once lived in a house that was almost 100 years old as newlyweds. We were woken up at 3 AM by the TV in the living room and the clock radio beside our bed turning on with the volume all the way up, 2 times. This was the first of many strange moments in that home. My brother did some research on it and discovered that it was built by some infamous family who were rumored to be cruel, viscous people. We ended up having the house blessed and at least the activity in the bedroom stopped. I have seriously blocked out so many things that happened to us that my husband, brother and sister remember more than I do. It is extremely disturbing and difficult to be afraid of your own home. I heard knocking on the door so I went to answer it. Turned out to be a police officer asking if I heard anything about an incident a few doors down. That wasn't what creeped me out. I'm deaf and I always take off my implant before I go to sleep. How the heck I knew there was someone knocking on the door? This is by far my favorite. I used to have night terrors as a kid. When I would close my eyes I would just hear screaming. When I opened my eyes it would stop but it would begin again as soon as I closed my eyes again. It used to scare the ever-loving crap out me. Used to sweat my brains out and my heart would race like crazy. But it would begin again as soon as I closed my eyes again. Blinking must have been weird for you. I've always sort of thought my house to be haunted. One time, I was sleeping with my back exposed, and an icy hand touched me. I can't really explain it. It sort of felt like air but a solid hand at the same time. Needless to say, it took me a couple years to start sleeping without my whole body covered with sheets again. Brother woke me up when he entered the house. He's loud. I tried to sleep again. I hear a bang on the door. Ignore it. I hear scratching on the door. I hear some little whimpers from inside the room. Frick. Hear the TV in the living room. Surely his brother and I ask him if he heard anything. Happens that brother had thrown an apple core that he had eaten. Threw too strong and hit my door. Its scratching was the cat because he woke him up. Whimpers? Nothing. Come back to the room. I see that my puppy is dreaming. I hadn't heard him doing that for months now. I don't scare easily, and this scenario is not particularly horrifying, but it felt so real. It caused me to feel on edge the entire next day. An anxious and awful feeling I will never forget. An awful night terror. Had gone on a ghost tour in Key West, not my first. That night I had a dream that me and some random people from different times of my life were walking around this really old castle. Other people in the group started getting scared, and I was all like everything is fine right then. We hear what you would assume was the voice of Satan, or God. A very loud and powerful voice that was talking. I don't remember what it was saying, but as the voice started a kid I had grown up in church with, we'll call him Dan, was levitating towards the ceiling. Head and arms thrown back, as if he was being picked up Darth Vader style. Stomach and knots at this point. I jump from the staircase and grab onto Dan's feet and the voice screams "No!" as we both fall from the ceiling, and the castle starts to collapse. I woke up gasping for air. Stomach in my throat. Maybe why I was gasping for air lol. Eyes full of tears and a puddle of sweat. Took me a while to get back to sleep. Had to calm down and let my skin settle back onto my body. I Facebooked Dan the next day. We had a good laugh about it. I had this Pikachu Furby thing that would say its name over and over again and its eyes would light up. Well, my mom never liked it and threw it down in the basement. She always thought that thing was a waste of batteries, so she took them out before tossing it. Weeks later my brother and I are sifting through our basement looking at toys and I decide to bring Pikachu back upstairs. I left it in the living room before going to bed and in the middle of the night I hear a distorted mechanical voice. Being the young kid I was, I thought it sounded demonic too. My mom wakes up too and we investigate only to find that dang Pikachu spazzing out, eyes flashing red screaming horrid nonsense. It really freaked the whole family out because it had no batteries that were powering it. My mom then and there threw that thing in the trash and it was whisked off never to be seen or heard of again. Thankfully. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.